friendships are important to you, it takes work.
Hey, it's Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy. A lot of us are struggling right now with how to stay open to others when we seem to be living in different realities. I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells with other people, but I also don't want to give up on connection. This is a podcast about staying with the moments we usually want to escape, the awkward ones, the tense ones, the ones that can actually teach us something. So let's get uncomfy.
I was feeling incredibly tense when I reached out to this friend of mine to fix a relationship that had gone way south.
Friends, I want you to meet Pete Odell. He is a tech innovator who's dedicated his retirement to helping Americans overcome loneliness. He's working on a tech solution for that, of course. And he's also got a book he co-wrote with his friend Johan. The book is called Dying for Friendship and Community. Pete, hi there. Welcome.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to have you. All right. So you're reaching out to an old friend and you're nervous about this. Kind of give us the context here. Who is this person and why were you going to send this email?
Well, I had a friend, and if ever, we talk about a brother from another mother. I mean, we were inseparable for years and years and years. I mean, I was a mentor in the beginning of our friendship. This person worked for me indirectly in one of my high growth companies that I worked for. And we just knew each other inside and out, and just had this mental connection that was fantastic. And
this was from earlier in your life.
Yep. He was a 25 year friend, probably early 90s. And unfortunately, I went to work for a company he was starting, and then about 3 weeks in, I literally had to quit, and it really ended up in a conversation where it's kind of, we were both like, "You're dead to me," right? And a lot of hard feelings, and that festered for 2-3 years where we really did not talk to each other, and then I decided, as part of this book, that I had reached out to a bunch of old friends and had some incredible experiences, but I decided it was time to fix that friendship. And so, I had to reach out and, I wrote an email, explained what I was doing. And it's one of those ones where it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I really want to do this or not. And I probably could have stopped at least 3 times and not done it. But I went ahead, and it worked out very nicely. I mean, we moved back to a civil, occasional. I don't think it'll ever recapture everything we had in the beginning, but it much better, and I felt very good about the fact that we both made the effort to kind of put things behind us.
What did you write in that email? What was the context that you explained
I said,
to
look,
him?
It was one of those, I've been thinking about this. I miss being your friend. I realized we had some big issues. I'd like to put them behind me. Let me know what you think. I mean, it wasn't, it was typical mail, right? It wasn't long and flowery. It was kind of short and terse and to the point. And
did he email back? Or call?
He emailed
or
back,
what happened?
and we caught up on a couple of big things. He'd had a life-threatening situation that he'd gone through, which we caught up on, which was I'm glad I found out about it. And
And tell me a little more about the urge that you were feeling. Like, did it feel like something unresolved, or was it that you were trying to? I mean, some of this was about you trying to make friends, right? Or sort of build your friendship network. What was the urge around this particular?
Well, this one just was irritating. Even before I started writing this book and I started this company around loneliness and friendship, I was doing global intelligence and a number of other things. But it would always would enter into my mind that I frequently think of this person and say, God, I should reconnect. And finally, when I started working on, the loneliness book and everything else, I actually went out and did a friend assessment, right? And one of the numbers in the whole friendship thing is Dunbar's number. So 150 people is the maximum number of people you can have as friends. And my co-founder and I sat down when we first started the company, and I said, so how many friends do you have? And he spent about a half hour, and he's like, I think it's about 25. And he goes, how many do you have? And I said, I know it's over 100, but I'm going to go back and check. And then I started going back, and then I started doing outbound phone calls and emails to people.
So did you actually have 100?
Over 100, yep.
You had over 100. Well, how do you qualify? I mean, can we stop there for a second? Because
sure.
I don't know.
So
that seems like a lot to me, actually.
It is a lot.
Like, are you talking like besties?
No,
are you talking?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So Dunbar he's been at Oxford for 30 years, and he's spent his whole life researching this number. And this number comes from when we were hunter-gatherers, and when the village got to be 150 people, they had to split the village in half because it couldn't handle the bureaucracy. Roman legions were 150 people because that was the ideal thing. Even today, Army units, the infantry companies are about 150 people. So it's a number that stood the test of time, and he's got this.
So this is sort of like the maximum number of people you can have sort of like strongish ties with as a human, like your capacity. Okay. Okay.
But it's a series of concentric circles. So you may have 5 to 10 really good friends, people you can call up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. because you had a flat tire and you need help, or somebody come pick you up. Or one of the jokes is a good friend will come see you in jail. A very good friend will come bail you out. Your best friend will turn around and go, boy, was that fun, right? And so there's different levels of friends. So there's 5 to 10 on the inner circle, 25 going out, maybe 50 to 75 going.
And I mean, is this this longtime friend / business partner / enemy who's dead to me / now reestablished acquaintance on the outer circle, would you say? Like, do you guys chat a lot now?
Even a couple rungs in. I mean, because we do have a lot of memories. I mean, we spent a lot of time together. We had a lot of fun. We went through a lot of trauma from a work standpoint. Yeah. So I mean, but he didn't move. I wouldn't call him at 2 a.m.
Okay. So, tell me a little more about this friend assessment. And you actually even write in the book that now, having written the book, you went and reached out to all these past people. And so now you do what did you call it? Oh, you do an annual friendship assessment, like every year around New Year's. So what are you assessing exactly?
Well, number one, if they're really a friend, why haven't I talked to them for the last 12 months? Right? Spoken to them, texted with them, know the status of their life, video conference, actually done something with them. I mean, I've got a fair number of fishing friends that I go do things with, and I've got other friends that I do other things with. And we're actually working as part of our social or friendship ecosystem that we're building. We're actually working on what's called a friendship relationship manager, where, you can keep track of who your friends are, and in some cases automatically figure out from your phone the last time you talked to them, those kinds of things. Because I'm terrible.
And then it's like sending you prompts like, hey, here's your task for the day. Go email this person.
Well,
I mean, which it actually sounds like a great idea, because it's so easy for it to just kind of slip away in the day-to-day. And I look at my Facebook group, and you're right, like there are a lot of people on there who I actually really care about, but I have this like false sense that I'm up on their life, even though if I were to sit down and think about it, I'm like, I think I've liked, like the only thing I've done is like clicked the like button on their posts over the last 15 years.
Well, it's like exercise, right? You can sit there and just go, I'm in pretty good shape. I get out and run once in a while, blah, blah, blah. But then there are people that they really pay attention to what they're doing, right? And they're like, they're tracking their steps, they're looking at consistencies, they're doing all kinds of things because they're taking it seriously. If friendships are important to you, it takes work, right? It's just not something, maybe if you live in the same town and you go to the same church and you're in the same bowling league, it doesn't take a lot of work because you're surrounded by this group of 30, 40, 50 people that you've grown up with. But most of us don't have that luxury, right? I mean, the YMCA, for example, was kind of the start of recognizing the loneliness epidemic. Way back in the Industrial Revolution, for the first time, they were taking these young men, picking them up, and moving them into the city and saying, oh, we just took you out of your village where you had an entire social structure, and now you're all by yourself working in this textile mill, right? And suddenly there's 50 of you, but some very smart person came along and said, let's start a Bible study, which turned into the YMCA, right? The Young Men's Christians Association, which is has millions of people involved with them today. They're still one of the most trusted community organizations around the world. And similarly with Rotary. Rotary started with 5 lonely guys in Chicago who decided to rotate their their meetings, which I think were fueled by, whiskey and a couple other things, around their various offices. But that's turned into, one of the largest service organizations in the country. I just joined Rotary because I went and did a presentation on our book, and it's like, wow, these are my people. Here's another 60 of my people right here in my town. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Of course, I think you mentioned in the book, and we're familiar with Robert Putnam's famous book now at this point, a sociologist who wrote about bowling alone and how how these like affinity groups and bowling leagues have declined over time. People are bowling more, but they're bowling less together, that kind of stuff. I was just thinking about like, okay, what are the affinity groups in my life? And church is actually a pretty big one, the community of people that I serve with and also who happen to live in my neighborhood, right? So what about making new friends? Talk to me a little bit about that. It feels like it gets harder and harder. As a kid, it seemed like it wasn't that hard to go up to some kid on the playground and be like, hey, you want to play? And now I feel like, how do I, unless I'm in a group of already stuff going on, like how do I meet people? How do I make new friends?
Well, you don't. That's a sad situation. That's what stimulated a large chunk of the software we're building, is trying to make introductions between people much more easy and comfortable. Because if I walk up to you at a neurologist conference, right? We're both, neurologists. I mean, we know we're neurologists, right? So what? But do you play pickleball? And I'm a pickleball fanatic. You may fly fish, and I'm like, I don't care anything about fly fishing, right? You walk up and you go, oh, nice shoes, right? Or how are you, right? And you try to start a conversation. It's brutal. But if you walk in, I'll give you a great example. We were out in Seattle, and we were working in the lobby of this hotel where I was staying, and these 25 people walked in, and we're like, wow, they must all be in a group, right? And we were, and they're boisterous, or having fun, blah, 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 blah. Well, we went over, and it turns out they weren't. They were all separate people, but they were joined by a common interest. They all had Ohio State University sweatshirts on, hats on, because they were there in town to play the Huskies. I'm like, do you guys all know each other? And they're like, no, but they go, we're all friends. We're all part of the tribe, the OSU tribe.
They just happened to find each other on the shuttle,
they were on the bus
or
coming
like
from
in the
the
lobby
airport together.
Okay.
And they all instantly bonded. So those are the kind of situations. When you talk about making new friends, it's how do you do that, right? Like right now, if you get on a cruise ship, there might be 2,000 people there, and your best friend might be 4 cabins away, but you may never meet him because you don't know that they have three or four things that you do, right? It's like, oh, you knit, you play pickleball, you love classical music, and we should meet. But we don't know that, right? So what we're doing.
So that's what you're building. Is this like a tech solution that when you're in a large group situation, a company could like deploy it at their conference or on their cruise ship, that allows people to find common interests. I guess
even in advance.
Social media kind of does that, right? Like, couldn't you just like post on Facebook, hey, I'm on the Princess whatever cruise and I'm looking for knitters, I don't know.
Probably not, because now suddenly you're posting to, 2.2 billion people, and the odds of anybody finding that are almost zero. You're getting bombarded with ads. So suddenly now you're going to get 27 ads for new cruises because you happen to take one. I mean, our whole focus is, look, we don't want to addict you, right? We want you to come into our app, find some human beings, and go have fun with them, right? So you only stay with us a little tiny bit to make that connection. You're not here to share pictures. You're not here to do X. You're not here to do Y. You're here to find people that are going to be fun and important and enlightening for, hopefully, 20 minutes or 20 years, right? Or your the next 50 years.
Would you tell me, I guess finally, Pete, about a friendship that reminds you why you're doing this? Have you had a friend encounter that has like really made a difference over your life, that you're like, yeah, this is my why. This is why friendship matters so much to me?
Friendship has always mattered. I mean, I had one friend who passed away probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. And I was having some of my own issues. And prior to him dying, I was home, I was kind of laid up, and he took the time to make me a CD of some of his favorite songs and send it to me. And to me, it was just a touching moment where it's like, you know what, friends are really good to have. And then unfortunately, I had another friend very similar to that, who I'd had for over 40 years, who just recently committed suicide. So I just went to his. He's 77, 78 years old, and I kind of understand now why, which I didn't in the beginning. And but he was somebody that I had stayed in touch with for over 40 years, and had been a very good friend the whole time. And I do a lot of work in the veteran community. We have a nonprofit that I volunteer for that takes veterans fishing, and veterans have this huge suicide problem where you come home from war and you're not in the best of spirits. You might have PTSD, you might have traumatic brain injury, and friends really become a very strong barrier to any kind of self-harm, those kinds of things, or even drug addiction, things like that. So having people that can hold you accountable. So it's just this essential part of life, right? I mean, you got to have it, and if you're ignoring it, you're ignoring it at your own peril, right? Just like if you're ignoring your diet and just eating chips and ice cream 6 days a week, it's going to catch up to you, right? Well, the same thing with friendship.
Pete Odell is a retired tech executive. He's author of the new book called Dying for Friendship and Community, Two Old Friends Attack Loneliness. He co-wrote it with his friend, Johan Wickman, and their tech platform that they're working on to help people connect with other people with like interests is called Conexus. You can check them out at getconexus.com. Pete, it's been great talking. Thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
And thank you for getting uncomfy with us today. I'd love to hear how you are making friends and keeping friends. And if you're rekindling old friendships that have gone sour, how did that go for you? How did you get through the discomfort of that? Email uncomfy@byu.edu or connect with us on social media to keep the conversation going. We are at uncomfy.podcast on Instagram. Uncomfy is a BYU Radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it. The team includes Maggie Mathis and Abby Karras. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. Hey friends, it's Julie. I want to recommend a show your whole family can enjoy together. It's called The Appleseed from BYU Radio. It's a storytelling podcast where you'll find everything from tales about talking critters to heartwarming real-life moments. These are award-winning storytellers from all over the world who come to the Appleseed stage, and they share experiences about gut feelings that paid off, small acts of kindness, even the occasional mishap like dyeing your eyebrows the wrong color. So gather your family for great adventures that might just spark stories of your own that you can share with the people you love to create connection. Tune into The Appleseed on BYU Radio or listen on your favorite podcast app.